think we're ready to go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. I'm Kathy Palmer, the Executive Director for the Travel and Tourism Research Association. Welcome to today's webinar, Multicultural Multiplier, Cultural Diversity's Impact on Travel Intent, presented by iolite Group's founder and CEO, Carroll Rheem. For nearly 20 years, Carroll has drawn on her expertise spanning marketing strategy, consumer behavior, economics, and data analytics to generate market intelligence with a distinctly holistic perspective. Her passion for creating clarity and insight into the industry's ever-changing environment has led countless organizations to better decisions. TTRA unites university academics, professional practitioners, and research experts, the best and brightest from the travel and tourism research community. If you're not a member, I encourage you to join us. You can learn more at TTRA.com. Be sure to follow us on social media and visit the TTRA website for information about webinars and conferences. If you haven't registered for the conference that's coming up in June in St. Louis, it's not too late. Registration ends on May 31st, so be sure to register today. I want to remind everyone we're using a Zoom webinar platform, so please drop your questions into the Q&A, and we'll get to as many as we can. I would now like to introduce today's speaker, Carroll Rheem from iolite Group.
Thanks, Kathy. Hello, everyone. It's wonderful to be here with you. Unfortunately, it's been a while since I've been able to attend a TTRA conference, but it's always such a great event. So hopefully you all will be able to attend this year. I'm thrilled to be here to share the results from a study that is really close to my heart personally. But before I do, I want to take a moment to introduce iolite Group and what we're about, because it really is an important foundation and a bit of perspective into why we chose to do this study and why we chose to design it the way that we did. So when we think about our world, our post-pandemic world, and how the pandemic affected us, for years we were deprived of so many things that really make us happy. Even going out to the movies, so much of our leisure world we were sort of locked away from. And coming out of that, we've seen in the past couple of years this explosiveness in travel and people really living out their consumption dreams, that revenge travel trip. And it's really bolstered the comeback for so many of our destinations across the United States, especially leisure-centric ones. Obviously, the corporate side has been a little bit more challenged, but it's been amazing to see that initial recovery and that bounce back happen so quickly, with a lot of destinations, leisure destinations, having record years coming right out of the gate. But now we're in a slightly different situation with a lot of elements of sort of economic softness. You have a combination of sort of labor challenges, super high prices, inflation, all of these things sort of rolling up into quite a bit of economic uncertainty. So demand remains strong, but the affordability of travel is putting it a little bit out of reach for a lot of potential or would-be travelers. Still, many are just figuring out a way to make it work, because one of the things that the pandemic did was make us realize how much travel means to us and how it's so important to our mental health and our well-being to take a break and take some time for ourselves. So from a research perspective and an analytics perspective, it's interesting to see how this is shaking out and how the trends are shifting as we settle into a more sort of normalized operating environment in the post-pandemic world. So as I mentioned, it's been amazing to see the comeback, especially of leisure destinations, and some of our greatest, sort of most iconic leisure destinations have seen this sort of flip-flop happened, where during the pandemic, we were so starved for demand and suddenly it's overflowing and, hotels are sold out and we don't have enough inventory and we don't have enough staffing. And so in so many ways, our greatest challenge has reversed, and over tourism has become a real issue, especially in, our most popular national parks and some of our key attractions across the country. At the same time, when we look at the broader scale of things and where we are in the United States, and we think about why we have so many issues around sort of labor, when we think about individual city dynamics, people getting priced out of paradise, it really is a time for us to reflect on what's going on and the bigger picture of things. Tourism is such a huge and important driver of economic growth. And so I think it's critically important that we take responsibility as such a large industry to understand the impact that we have. What we're looking at here in this chart is income inequality in the United States. And when I saw this chart, I was really impacted by it. So to explain, the red bar or the red line is showing the portion of income earned by the top 10%, top 10 highest income earners. And then the blue line is the bottom 50%. The green line is the top 1%. And you can see over the period starting in the 40s, inequality was the balance was really shifted, and we saw a lot higher of a proportion going to the bottom 50%, that blue line. You see it kind of grow over that time and remain pretty steady and continue to increase until we got to the 1980s, and then things started to slip and things started to become more unequal. Kind of the greed is good impact of Gordon Gekko economics. And the impact, has been gradual, but, here we are in, 2023, and the picture that this sort of equilibrium has shifted back to a place where, it's similar to where we were in the 1940s. And that level of inequality has so much impact on society. And, when we think about the political divide and where the challenges are in our world, so much of it is driven by inequality and the frustration felt by so many that they're working so hard and they cannot get ahead. They just cannot keep up. And, all of the situational factors around the pandemic, inflation, all of these things just make that worse. So when we think about travel and tourism and what we do and what we can accomplish and how we think strategically long-term, iolite has a very strong and specific point of view that we have to consider over tourism, climate change, and inequality as critical business issues, not just things for the CSR committee to consider, not just to have discussions with our employees, but to really think about how our business and our industry addresses these challenges. We have to take responsibility as such an enormous driver of GDP and economic force for the country and our local communities. Thankfully, tourism has so much potential power for positive good for our communities. We are not extractive as an industry. We very much can create symbiosis to create positive community impact. And so really, iolite is about this. How do we harness that power to do positive things for our community? Because ultimately, we believe that effective long-term tourism strategy has to have positive community impact as its ultimate goal. Economics is certainly part of that, a huge part of that, but we're selling ourselves short if we're not thinking holistically about the positive impact that we have. So with that lens, when we sat down with Brand USA to think about how we could support positive community change, one of the things that we really thought about was the incredible diversity of the United States and how much of an asset it is. And so I designed this study to get to the heart of that. let's quantify the impact of that diversity as an asset. What can we learn about culturally curious travelers, and how can we help our destinations learn how to effectively package information and reach out to consumers with the right tactics that hit them with the right message at the right time. So this study was brought to us or made possible by these sponsors, Destinations International, Brand USA, and Miles Partnership. So a special thank you to them. So this study ultimately is born from the work that I did at Brand USA over the years, and really thinking about how to support destination positioning and understanding that even the most beautiful places in the world, the most beautiful landscapes and beaches, ultimately are difficult to differentiate, one beach over another mountain over another. Really what makes a place special or magical is its culture. And it's ethereal and it's difficult to define, but yet you know it when you see it. And travelers, so much so, are motivated to come to the United States because of its diversity in culture. It really is the hallmark of what differentiates the United States compared to a lot of other countries in the world. And when you think about any aspect of culture, and here we're looking at some examples of food. Hopefully you've had lunch, so this doesn't make you more hungry, but it's been such a powerful driver of demand for the United States for such a long time. So again, this is really the impetus for us to sort of design this study and think about what the value is of that diversity. And when we think again about the potential of tourism to be a driver of positive community change, by showcasing cultural diversity, there's a huge opportunity to both enrich the traveler experience. These are the types of experiences that they're looking for, and also support the success of small, often minority-owned businesses in our community. So to take nothing away from the great work that has been done around sort of ethnic groups of travelers, this is not considering the ethnicity of the traveler at all, but rather focusing on how to showcase cultural diversity in our own communities. So onto the methodology. We went to the field last spring in 5 different countries. So we did a domestic component in the United States, and then we went to Canada, Mexico, UK, and China, and spoke to 1,000 respondents in each of the international markets, 2,000 domestically in the United States. The international travelers, the travelers in the international markets were screened to make sure that they had taken an international trip. The US travelers included both domestic and international travelers. So let's go through some of our key findings. First, starting off thinking about travel in general and the motivations that people had. As I said in the beginning, we're so changed by the pandemic and that experience that it sort of called to light certain aspects of why we travel. So we asked people to specify their top motivator, and there were multiple motivators always that we have when we take a trip. But in general, people fell into 3 broad categories. There's a large group who really just wanted to de-stress. So sort of shaking off the sort of tension built up over sort of the daily grind. Then there's a large group that really aims to return to normalcy. A lot of this group is families and older travelers who just want to go back to the way things were. And then there's the live it up group who really want to make up for lost time, and they will sleep when they get back home. They're generally tend to be younger, not surprisingly, and really are out there to maximize every moment of their trip. And so these are 3 sort of general groupings that we find in terms of motivation. When we look at the numbers and some more of the specifics around motivation, you can see there's quite a bit of difference across the countries that we looked at. De-stressing and relaxation is the most common response, in Mexico in particular at 34%. But then, you can see how spread out these different motivations are, and there's quite a bit of range across the board. China sticks out in two notable ways, wanting to immerse themselves in different cultures at 29%. You can see they're an outlier there. And then the desire to connect with nature and the great outdoors. So when we consider the much of the traveling population, or the international traveling population of China, is living in large, sprawling urban destinations, and how long they were suffering through lockdowns and things like that, that really calls to light the importance of, just being able to get outside, connect with the great outdoors. That desire for that is so enormous, and to really sort of get lost in another part of the world and immerse themselves in another culture. It's that much more powerful because they've been so isolated for so many years through the pandemic. What's interesting is, as always, when we do crosstabs, we get to see some of the differences within a population. This is looking at an income cut. So when we look at the different markets, some markets we could see quite a bit of difference in motivation depending on income. Others we didn't see as much of a difference. So the United States and the UK actually look quite similar, where the higher level income households were a bit less likely to be motivated by de-stressing and relaxation, and a little bit more motivated to be sort of more destination centric. So fulfilling a longstanding desire to go to a particular place, but especially connecting with the great outdoors and, sort of getting outside, getting away from the same four walls, and also immersing themselves in different cultures. So when I go to the UK, you can see a lot of that shift looks pretty similar. Again, similarly lesser motivated by de-stressing and relaxation, and a much stronger response in particular for the great outdoors. In other markets, we don't see quite the same difference. There is, in Canada, for example, a little bit stronger response to wanting to immerse myself in different cultures. But in general, we don't see the larger differences that we saw in the US or UK. Similarly for Mexico, the trend doesn't look too different. And also for China, they're just a bit more likely to be bored with their everyday routines. But in general, the percentages are pretty similar across the board. So the next thing, sort of digging a layer deeper, that we wanted to understand was activities. So much of our vacation experiences are driven by the things that we want to do. I don't think anyone, or at least an extreme few number of people, travel halfway across the world just because they want to sleep in a hotel room, right? You travel because you want to experience the place. And what we did was we started sort of high level to understand how much were people motivated to want to visit sort of just the iconic stuff versus the more off the beaten path type of experiences. And what we found is that people really want to mix and match. So a majority, almost across the board, were sort of finding this idea of mixing and matching, having a bit of the iconic stuff, having a bit of the sort of hidden gem kind of experience to be the most appealing. And then, when you think about the implications of this, so the market that was the most likely to say that they prefer to stick to well-known areas and activities was China, and that's at 30%. So the flip side of that is saying that means that 70% of Chinese travelers want at least some of that off the beaten path experience stuff. And that's extremely high, right? 70% is the lowest of those markets. So it really highlights for destination marketers how enormous the opportunity is to highlight and showcase lesser known experiences, more intimate experiences, and go a bit deeper into people's more specific interests, because there is so much demand for that type of experience. And I think travelers in general and the culture of travel around the world has shifted a bit, not that people don't like icons anymore, but people understand if you're going to a place, you're really doing yourself a disservice if you're only sticking to that iconic stuff, because you're going to miss out on so many of the amazing special things about a destination. So it's great to see that strength and that enormous interest for those more intimate experiences. One methodological note: for the United States, we screened out those who said that, or no, we did not screen out those who said that they prefer just to relax and not do much of anything on vacation. For the international markets, we did screen that group out because so much of our research was going to be based on activities. And so we wanted to make sure that our sample was high quality and was going to be able to speak honestly about what was feasible for them and what they would be interested in. And so we didn't want to keep that group of travelers who didn't want to do anything, because this was essentially all about activities and destination. So the next challenge for us in designing this study and thinking about how to approach it is defining culture. And they mentioned it's a difficult thing, and it really is in the eye of the beholder. It's very rarely truly black and white. So we took a particular approach to this study, and what we mean by multicultural is cultural diversity in all of its forms, not just ethnic. So we certainly didn't want to exclude the LGBTQ+ community, and we didn't want to exclude important elements of local culture, because the consumer doesn't think that way. If you're interested in local culture, you're not going to only draw those lines on ethnicity. It just didn't make sense from a consumer perspective. So when we talk about multicultural, we're talking about local culture that could mean the grunge scene in Seattle, right? It's true to the place, a meaningful sort of group of people that create a culture around it. And so that was our approach. And when we talk about multicultural, that is what we mean. So what we did is have people take a sort of imaginary trip to a particular city. And we chose 4 sample cities across the United States. This is a sample of Minneapolis and itinerary options they were presented with. So they selected a certain number of activities that they would want to include in a 3-day trip to Minneapolis. And there's a broad range of different experiences that they could have. The study was designed to deliberately take the most popular experiences of each kind. We wanted to make sure everything just had its best chance to shine. What's great to see is just how spread out everything is. And even though there are some clear iconic attractions in Minneapolis, the thing that people wanted to do the most was take a food tour across Eat Street, which is this really great global cuisine area with so many different restaurants in all different kinds. So inherently we can see, with those attractions, the appeal of multicultural experiences is so strong. And it was really great to see. The challenge came to something like the Prince and Paisley Park tour, where you could argue Prince is so iconic, such an enormous global superstar, you could call that experience an iconic experience. But we felt that the spirit of that tour and of Prince himself and his principles, that it felt more appropriate to label that as multicultural. But again, we just had to make the choice. It is not, this kind of research isn't quite so black and white. And that was just one of the facets that we had to sort of grapple with for the study. So based on the responses to that itinerary exercise, we grouped people into 3 different segments. So the iconic segment are those who chose mostly iconic experiences, neutral, whereas even between iconic and multicultural, and then the multicultural group that chose a majority of multicultural experiences. Now, so when we did this segmentation, we had to put people in buckets. the vast majority of people, even in the iconic group, chose at least some multicultural experiences. For most, again, it was not black and white, but this is what allowed us to understand, like, this multicultural group is very motivated by those types of experiences, and that's why they're segmented this way. So based on that segmentation, we looked at their intended spend in that market. So we said, we walked them through that itinerary exercise. They selected the options that they found most appealing. And then we asked them, how much would you spend in that destination? And how many days would you want to stay? And so what we were able to do then was look at the differences in intended spending across the different segments. And what we found is that there is a multicultural multiplier for the mature markets. So in the United States, in Canada, and the UK, we saw a significant difference in the amount of spending per person per night by sort of that grouping. So in the United States, the difference was 36%, in Canada, 46%, in the UK, 14%. And what the difference is really driven by is the profile of the multicultural traveler. They tend to be more experienced, and they tend to be just more active when they're on their trips. They do lots of different things. They're really curious. They want to immerse themselves in different neighborhoods and really explore. And because of that motivation and that desire to really experience the local culture of a place, they end up spending more. In the sort of lesser developed markets, Mexico and China, we do not see that same sort of differential between the multicultural group and the others. And that is driven predominantly by the price of the experiences that they're looking at. So for example, if we're thinking about New York City, just the price tag of going to see a Broadway show, those experiences tend to be more expensive. And so in those emerging markets, it's less about the profile of the traveler and just the tactical aspects of how much it costs to do some of these iconic things. So in the more mature markets, a lot of the travelers in general have already sort of been there, done that, seen that. So that is what drives that differential between the more mature and less mature markets. So ultimately, this study really told us, a hypothesis that we had in general, but it really gave us the proof that showcasing cultural diversity is not only politically correct, it's strategically correct. And this is why it's so important that we think about these things when it comes to strategy, because these are not just nice to haves or, social programs or things for, employees to kind of do on a volunteer basis. This is about business. This is about driving demand to our destinations. And so this needs to be part of the lens that we think about because it is an asset that we have. And what's fascinating about this to me is understanding where it comes from. So, a lot of people are conscientious these days. They want to be responsible as travelers. So I was curious to see, what was behind this? Was it that conscientiousness, or was it not? Or was it just simply about these things just sound appealing to me? And so what we found was that, rather than it being about the super ego, that angel on your shoulder that's saying, do the right thing, be, kind to the world and the environment, versus, id, that sort of hedonistic glutton, that just wants to have a good time and, do whatever it wants, the devil on your shoulder. Which one of these was kind of driving that desire for multicultural experiences? And we found that it was really, if anything, the id. So the way that we got to this is we asked people how much they consider the impact of their travel on the environment in general and in the local community. And specifically, we were looking at this option. I try to support locals, when I travel. And across the board, it's roughly half of travelers that are really thinking about this when they take their trips. And so with that option, we split the group to look at the multicultural travelers versus others. And we really don't see much of a difference. And interestingly, in the United States, for example, the multicultural group is actually a little bit less likely to say that they are conscientiously thinking about supporting locals. So clearly that's not what's motivating them to want to have these experiences. It's really just that those are the things that are appealing to them. So again, it's really about business. This is straight up marketing. It's not a PSA. It's not we're not sort of doing this in a way, or we don't need to do this in a way that is appealing to that angel. It's just, straight up very instinctive demand. It's what's going to make them happy. So what does this mean for the destination decision? This is an actual video of someone making a destination decision. It's incredibly complex. It is nonlinear, and it happens over a long period of time. So when we think about how to impact that decision that is so complex, it is really helpful to kind of segment it into two different phases. So there is that first piece that happens, which is as a destination, you have to get on the wish list. And that is kind of the first task. And so there's this laundry list of destinations we tend to keep in our heads. And then you have the trip context. So, okay, what do I want to do for the summer vacation this year with the kids? And then you reconcile that with the destination wish list, and you kind of cross things off, and then something bubbles up to the top, and then that's how you make your decision. So there are two tasks essentially for a destination marketer. You have to first get on that list, and then you have to compete with other destinations that the traveler is thinking about. When it comes to icons, that generally is the type of content that gets you on that wish list. The things that makes you truly stand out and really help you grab the attention of the traveler. For the multicultural content, it is kind of the next step, the trip context, where that becomes a bit more relevant and a little bit more compelling because it's kind of bringing it to life. Like, what else will I do in that destination? And it becomes a little bit more practical and tactical in that context. So when we think about the life cycle of a trip decision, really the iconic content performs best in the dream phase, because that is that ideation phase. Oh, where in the world would I want to go? And then when it comes to the research phase and people are thinking a little bit more about, okay, what would I do when I get there? I know I want to see some icon. I know I want to see the Empire State Building, but what else would I do in New York? So this is the optimal phase for that multicultural content. And, the goal is to kind of intercept and get in front of the consumer with those stories that bring to life those experiences. And that is the period during which that content will perform the best. And when we think about the media choices or the incredible range of options that we have, like, where do we want to tell these stories, or what is the best media and mechanism to get this content to consumers? Really, when we look across the board of sort of information sources that people use when they're vacation planning, most of these are going to be sort of transaction centric. So looking at pricing, things like booking websites, travel review information websites, also really important, and an important platform potentially for this kind of content. We can see just how high the percentages for people who are using these types of informational websites, the highest in Mexico at 60%. And then the other thing that really stands out as opportunity in terms of media channels is influencer and user content on social media, especially in China. And China China is a bit of an exception, but that is the largest channel for in terms of the people, making a choice for where they're going to look for information to make a trip. In China, the power of social media platforms in terms of influence on travel decisions cannot be overstated. It really has developed in a way that is different than any other market in the world. Mexico also has a very strong response to that. And the US also as well, not quite as much. And then the impact for Canada and the UK is a little bit lesser so, but still an important channel. And, when we think about the job, when you think about as a destination, all the different media touch points that you have and what is the right message at the right time for push media, display advertising, any sort of broadcast scenario where we're looking at a broad group of people and it's going to be kind of more of a first time interaction. Push media really lends itself more to the iconic stuff. And that's when you really need to grab their attention, blow their minds, show them the most sort of epic kind of imagery. And that's where, that content's really going to shine. And then for pull media, social media channels, sort of, YouTube videos and things like that, and certainly websites, pull media where you're drawing people in to consume content. That is where this type of multicultural content really shines because it's more immersive. It's when people are in the mood to dig in and really learn about a destination and just sort of see these stories and really figure out what they want to do when they get to your destination. That's really the huge opportunity for this type of content. So ultimately, when we think about the goal of this research and to understand, the implications of it, I think every destination, whether they have a lot of local diversity or not, has a range of diverse cultural experiences in their destination. And there's so much we can do as destination marketers to showcase those amazing experiences and connect travelers to them. As we've seen, the appetite is absolutely enormous. And, this really taps into that potential for tourism to have such an amazing, positive local community impact. So with that, I am happy to take questions. I don't see any that have come in thus far, but as a reminder, you can type your questions into that Q&A chat box. No questions for me. Okay.
Wow. You did a fabulous job. There's not even one question. Great. Carol, we really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to come and talk to us. The recording will be available afterwards for everyone who members part of it are here, and they will get a copy of that. But thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
Oh, someone says great research. Thank you.